So in our ceremony, I had this lovely kind of insight around something that I've kind of always understood, but the language around this feels very clear, is that healing happens through expression, and specifically because trauma is an impression, right? So like kind of like the imprint of trauma on our cells, on our being, on our parts, right? And kind of expressing. And so it feels like movement has been very, very healing for me. And I think that there is something that really that ayahuasca has taught me, in the most profound way, is the wisdom of the body.
Kinga, welcome to Cura Medicina.
Hi, Derek. Thank you so much.
Of course. It's okay. The first thing I have to ask is where did you get your name and what does it mean? It's so powerful and so unique.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking, actually. So, Kinga was not my birth name. Kinga is a name that I chose when I was 13 during the process of Catholic confirmation. You get to choose a kind of like a spiritual name, and you choose the name of a saint. And I always was really drawn to this name, even at that age when I was about 13 years old. And um, I didn't really know anything about the name until more recently. It's of a Polish saint, who has very much a Buddha type story, where she was an aristocrat, wealthy, gave up her wealth to help those in need, and really to dedicate her life for the healing of others. So very kind of kind of altruistic, leaving the monetary and material aspects of life for what was truly meaningful. Um, but then Kinga also, that what I was always really attracted to, that I was more aware of, has to do with the etymology and the Germanic, its Germanic root, which has to do with Kinga being kind of like she's like a clan warrior. So she creates community. She's fierce. She's grounded. She acts in integrity, but she's not fearful, right? And so there's kind of like this. There's um a compassion and a wisdom to this name. It really is quite incredible. And then what I found out most recently, is that it has a Tibetan kind of sound, and Tibetan Buddhism came into my life about 3 years ago. And so I spoke with some people who know Tibetan, and the Nga means the number 5, which is a very important number in Buddhism. And then the key, or kind of relates to chi and life force for me personally, right? So on a personal level, the key relates to life force, and then the number 5, which is just this really potent number in both sacred geometry and Tibetan Buddhism, and and a few different spheres that feels important to me. So it feels very powerful. And my previous name I was born with Patrycja. I'm from Poland, and I actually gave that name up when I came to the U.S. because I didn't like the name Patricia. Sound was always like, I was very attuned to sound. It really affected me, and I really didn't like this Patricia when I came to the U.S. I was about 7.5, and one of my first teachers, because she didn't know what to do with this name that's spelled Patrycja. She started calling me Patrice, and so for the vast majority of my life in America, I'm about to turn 50, and I literally just this past December decided to really step into Kinga, and I birthed Kinga actually at a ceremony, and Patrice was just put to rest, and so it's very powerful because the um uh life, and the fact that I have life, and the fact that I can give myself life, and continue to invest in my longevity, is a really important theme for me at this point in time, and I really feel like stepping into Kinga gives me the opportunity to have more time. Yeah.
When I first saw it, what I thought was king, but a divine um, manifestation of a king, like a kinga, you know. So even for somebody who has no idea about the etymology, it give for a female, it gives such a beautiful wrapper of like royalty, but also embracing the divine. So, and you
Yeah.
wear that very well, I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. It actually brings me so much joy to say it when like I actually I'm less shy about introducing myself. Um, if someone asks me what my name is now, I say Kinga, like I literally I feel like that. When I used to say my name is Patrice, it was kind of like Patrice? Like I was scared. I was scared to I mean, and I don't mean that, literally, but there was kind of an element to that. And now this name Patrice sounds like a deflating balloon to me. And I'm just like, okay, just let it go. Let it go.
Oh,
And it's quite interesting because I don't know if it's okay for me to go into this now, if it feels okay. But where you and I met at that ceremony, there was some really, really incredible information that was given to me that I downloaded, which was that my birth name that my mother called me in with, Patrycja. She chose that name 5 years before I was born, and that it was that she called me in for the healing of my ancestors as Patrycja. And Patrycja obviously like kind of relates to patrician, so nobility, aristocracy, these sorts of things. And also creativity and focus on wealth, which are all things that actually very much characterized my earlier life. I was an artist, and I I we finances were always a struggle, but I had this kind of orientation towards wanting to experience wealth, and so it's really interesting this kind of transition from Patrycja to Kinga, where I'm, and I don't know that I can say that in complete honesty, that I've completely given up the desire for having, monetary comfort and these sorts of things. I wish that I could fully step into that, but I'm certainly getting closer. Like it's not the primary focus by any means anymore. Not that it was entirely when I was younger, but there was a little bit more of that orientation. And then I was told in the ceremony that when I came to the US and I changed my name from Patrycja, which ends with this ah, right? Like this primordial sound of ah, to Patrice, that I actually gave my power away. And that's really what my life has felt like in a lot of ways, is having uh eh, not having been able to fully step into my power, even though I always um even just on a physical level, I was always very strong. I always recognized that there was a power in this body, but it felt very tenuous. Like, can I really step into that? Is it okay for me to be powerful? Wanting to be powerful, but not being able to fully embody that. So it was very, very profound learning about this in this last ceremony.
yeah. And then what a powerful reminder of moving from an old name to a new name that embodies all of the things that I feel mm, you're wanting to embody, right? The way you described the word and the way your face lit up when you said the word. So powerful. So powerful. Let's talk a little bit, and we've heard a little bit of the story, but I'd love to know more of how you got here. Like, what was the journey like? Maybe give us some key moments that turned you from your old self to your new self, some ceremonies or things that helped you along the way. I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So, I think for me, it's important to just kind of start at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I was born in Poland, um, and I was there until I was about 4.5. And I always had kind of a orientation towards spirituality. Like I remember very specific thinking, having these very specific kind of concepts coming through from me as a child, um, around wisdom and knowledge and I didn't call it ego, but what happens to people through ego, and especially kind of like in these kind of years that are um, like developmental, and then prior to when things kind of like prior to old age, where we kind of start to soften again. And I really saw this in adults, this kind of rigidity, these this kind of ignorance that arises kind of in midlife. And so there's always kind of this orientation towards that. And but it was I had a very challenging life where after around the age of 5, we were on my dad was a merchant sailor, and so we were with him because this is during communism in Poland. And so even though there was a lot of red tape, there was a lot of things that could happen that wouldn't be able to happen in a different kind of setting. So the merchant sailors could have their wives and families with them on this merchant vessel. And as we were basically just on a job with my dad and going to different ports, we were told that Poland was going to go into civil war, that Russia was going to attack. And so as we arrived at the last port, Ceuta in Spain, um, we were told that if we don't deboard, that ship could go to Siberia. The martial law had gone into effect, so we couldn't call our family to find out like what is actually happening on the ground. We were just being given this news by these port agents, and so it was kind of very similar what was purported to what was potentially going to happen was what happened with Ukraine in the last few years, right? So there was, and my parents were very young. They were about 24, 25, and they had to make this decision. They had their child with them, and we had a good life in Poland, actually, financially and otherwise. And my parents had just finished building their house, and they had literally nothing with them, and they decided to deboard. And my dad was going to then be a deserter, so it was known we could not go back to Poland. We were then going to just be refugees in Spain. And we stayed in Spain for 2 years as in transit status. And then finally my parents had this uh intention of coming to the US, and so we could have gone to other places, but they really wanted to come to the US. And so we finally came to the US, and we landed in Oakland, California, is where we were sponsored to move to. So um yeah, so then we're here as immigrants, technically refugee status, and did all the things that people in that situation do. Or my parents, worked multiple jobs and moved a bunch, and um, just tried to make a life here. Had to learn the language. After learning Spanish, it was a little bit easier for me because I spoke Spanish really well, being in Spain for 2 years. So it's a little easier for me as a child, like being, because it was a lot of kids around me were also Spanish speaking. So, but it was a really challenging time growing up as a foreigner in the U.S. And then there was a whole you know experience with being a teenager that's really struggling with drugs and alcohol. Alcohol kind of became a really big problem for many years. There was an eating disorder. Um, there were all sorts of issues relating to um, me rejecting my body, rejecting my form. I was very tall. Most of the kids around me were, I don't know, they were very petite. They were very petite. It was really interesting. Once I got, I don't know, out of the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and got a little bit older, then I don't know, there were people, I don't know, there were taller people around me. Where I grew up, for some reason, everybody was like really petite compared to me. And so it was a tough time, being different, being a foreigner, being tall, all these things. And then I was an artist throughout most of my adult life, and then my grandmother, my mom's mom, died of cancer when I was about 27 or 28. And I had a lot of these ambiguous health problems. I'm sure many of them had to do with the eating disorder that was really pretty profound and went on from the time that I was about 13 until 30. But also potentially there was this kind of ambiguous gluten intolerance, celiac thing that was going on. And I became a health coach actually. So I finished my MFA at Hunter in New York, and then I kind of immediately started this program at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and became a health coach. Um, and that really led to a profound healing for me. I was able to heal from the eating disorder. I was able to um, just really begin to thrive in my body for the first time. Really felt really good in my body. My body changed a lot. I um, just started eating really well. So this website, Clean Living Guide, that I had sent you. That's what that was about. And really started to explore the artistry of cooking, and that just brought me so much joy and brought me back to my roots, because Poland is um, all of Eastern Europe, and I don't know, I would say that a lot of, you know, countries, I would say countries outside of the US are all closer to uh, culinary traditions that are, you know, um, much healthier and, you know, rooted in their particular cultures. And there's just um, uh, a lot there. Like in Poland, you're eating a lot of offal, you're eating a lot of fermented foods, you're eating foods that are really healthy and not really thinking about it. No one's dieting. I mean, now Poland's really different, and there's fast food there, and there's more people who are you know, struggling with weight potentially, and you know, these sorts of things. But and like in the past, people didn't think about like, oh, should I be eating meat? Should I not be eating meat? Should I be eating carbs? Should I not be eating carbs? It was just people ate naturally, and there was, you know, like kind of a natural shift as people got older. Yes, they did put on weight, but generally speaking, most young people didn't really have any major issues with that kind of thing. So that it's more of a natural kind of relationship to food, and so kind of brought me back to that. And there was this whole period of about 10 years where I was just in tip-top health. I stopped drinking. I smoked in my 20s, and so all, you know, that all these sorts of bad, or you know, habits that were not good for my body fell away. And I and throughout all of that time, I was exploring things very loosely, like in kind of in the self-help world, as far as meditation is concerned, and these sorts of things. And I say that because there wasn't like a strong framework, there wasn't a lineage, which I actually think is pretty problematic now that I kind you know, can kind of see in hindsight, like, oh gosh, I was reading all of these books, I was reading Wayne Dyer, I was reading all the Hay House authors, I was, you know, trying this meditation, that meditation, and it just all, it's like it wouldn't stick. It was like passing through. It was like, you know, like one day I'm doing the heart meditation, the next day I'm like focusing on breath work, the next day I'm trying to control my mind, you know. I mean, it's just like, you know, it's this like really chaotic approach that is not rooted in a lineage. And I blamed myself for not having a lot of success with that, you know. But there was this very strong interest in spirituality always. And one of the things that was kind of interesting for me with the MFA is that I really recognized when I was in that program that creating artwork is just channeling for me. It is channeling, it is being with spirit. And I've always really struggled with academics, even though I've achieved a lot of things, and I've made it work, but I've really struggled, and it was putting my work into a box that just didn't fit for me, having to be as analytical and as kind of focused on like the canon, right? Like, you know, and all these sorts of things. And so it kind of, it created a rift for me with my art, and it's all purposeful, like, and it's all okay in hindsight, but it was a bit painful at that time in my life. And so when I when I got into my 40s, I was still working in art, even though I was a health coach and I had this website. I was never able to, even though I kind of tried to do all the social media things and tried to do everything that I thought one would do to have a blog, a successful blog. It didn't really work out that way. The health coaching didn't really take off because it's harder to find clients as someone who's not licensed in a as a licensed therapist or provider, et cetera. And so I was still doing photography, and that career had gone into a space that wasn't satisfying for me anymore. And I really decided I wanted to be a medical provider, and I was so old at that point in terms of that type of career and the 10 years that you would have to put into becoming either a naturopath or an MD. And I had discovered along the way this nurse practitioner path. And so I dedicated myself to studying the human all of the kind of the courses for human for like a biology uh major, and you have to do all of these prerequisites before you apply to those programs. I did all of that, and I applied to a couple programs, and I got into Vanderbilt in Nashville. And after I started that program, about 9 months into it, I was diagnosed with high-grade serous carcinoma. This is a type of ovarian cancer, and it's a very malignant type of cancer that is typically only found at late stage 3 or stage 4, and is usually terminal. It's like basically 70%. What I was told when I was initially diagnosed is that in 2020 was that I have 70% chance of getting cancer over and over and over and being dead within about 2 years. So, so 70% chance I wasn't going to live past 2022, rough or like middle of 2022. And I didn't get a first recurrence until 2023, which was great because that allowed me to finish school. I finished school while on chemo and doing all the surgeries and all the things that were required of me. I considered going the naturopathic path entirely, but I was advised very clearly by everybody, all the naturopaths that were involved in my treatment, both Gerson centers. I considered going and if anyone's familiar with the Gerson protocol, I really strongly considered that, and they told me explicitly that if I came to one of their centers, I would die. So I had to do chemo, and I really made peace with Western medicine through that process, because even though I was in a Western medicine program, my orientation towards healing has always been holistic, natural, um, just everything in the kind of uh, in that kind of realm, whether energy medicine or herbalism or um, uh, energetic healing, like through acupuncture, just any of these sorts of things. Dietary approaches were my preference, and so it was a pretty bitter pill to swallow. Like, oh wow, I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I was running every day. I was going to yoga every day. My body felt like I was 30 when I was about 44 at this point, and I started chemo, and I did it alongside all of the naturopathic treatments. I couldn't do a surgery first. Typically for cancer, ideally you remove as much of the cancer as you can, then you go into chemo. We couldn't do surgery because I had cancer on my bladder. I had cancer on all over my intestines. I would probably end up with 2 ostomies, and that just was not an option for me. I didn't, yeah, that I did not want to have that experience at that point in time in my life. And so we went into chemo, and I had a remarkable recovery. I was later told by another one of my oncologists that it was somewhere in the 1% of improvement. And what I owe that to is the naturopathic treatments, which included 5-day water fasts around the chemo, which also allowed me to tolerate the chemo really, really well. So when they went in to have this for the surgery, there was no cancer even at the microscopic level midway through the chemotherapy, which is really remarkable because the cancer it's a cancer that my oncologist described as thin sand on everything. So if it were to ever kill kill me, it's going to triangulate all of my organs. It'll just and I was starting to experience that through when I was having bowel movements. It felt how it was diagnosed was that I was having these acute pains, even though I felt great. I was running every day. Like I said, I felt like, I mean, just I felt fantastic. My body was super healthy and happy. And, but there was this acute pain that literally would bring me down to my knees directly before I passed stool. So as the stool was descending through my intestines and the colon, it was just acutely painful because of the way the cancer was wrapped around my intestines. Um, so then I finished my program. I got a first job in community health in a city called Banning out here near Palm Springs, and I was driving out to my job, and I was always oriented towards doing psychedelic medicine. So even though I knew I wanted to start in community health, and I felt like that was important, and it was also a really wonderful opportunity. There's just been this grace all along this this path that is just so extraordinary. I just it's just it's ineffable. There are no words for how much grace there has been throughout all of these challenges. And so I started.
Just a quick question. Were you doing psychedelics during the cancer also or
Oh, okay. So
before?
yeah. So
Yeah.
I knew that I was interested in pursuing ketamine treatment in my career because I knew that was legal. And I had sat with ayahuasca once in 2016 with Bird Tribe, if that's okay for me to say that. um, and uh, and it was an interesting experience. It wasn't what I had hoped. I didn't have finances were always such a struggle for me. I didn't have the money or time to go to Peru or anywhere else. And so I had had an interest in sitting with ayahuasca since like 2014 or 13, somewhere around there. And then I finally had this opportunity to sit with the medicine in LA, and it was kind of a weird experience for me. It was a little bit weird. It was both beautiful, but then I had like kind of a very strange, very strange. I mean, in hindsight now, after I've sat in a total of maybe not that many, but about like 12 or 13 ceremonies, and I've never had anything like this come up again. I was in this beautiful kaleidoscope of um visions that I didn't quite understand them, other than they were a bit entertaining there because they were so beautiful for me. I didn't have the connection that I do now to the medicine. So it was beautiful, interesting. And then all of a sudden there was just a smear of blood on the wall. And it was like a white wall with a smear of blood. And and I knew it had something to do with my ancestors. So being from Poland, my grandparents went uh through a very difficult time in World War II. And then my parents were born just a few years after the war. And, and then my great grandparents had very, challenging time with World War One. So there's just like those wars have always been very close to me. It's always felt like yesterday for me with especially with World War II. And so there was something about and I kind of and I had this sense that it had to do with my great grandmother on my maternal side, who her father was taken to a work camp in Germany, and so it was just her mother and her siblings. And herself and they were on the front line, and the German soldiers were living in their house. So and I've never heard anything bad. My grandmother has since passed, but she always spoke actually very fondly of the Germans while they were there. And so, but there was this intuition that there was horror, and I started to scream, which I've never done in any other ceremony. Like I've never had anything like that happen. You and I saw each other. My experience is generally what you saw, and I couldn't be supported because of the setting. I couldn't be supported well because I mean people tried, but it was also I felt like I was disruptive for the ceremony. I didn't know, and so I didn't get to sit with the medicine again until 2023. But while I was in school, I did sit with ketamine with this incredible psychiatrist in Nashville who was a wonderful mentor for me, and that was really such a profound experience. Ketamine is such a beautiful medicine, very very different kind of medicine, so gentle and so accessible and digestible, and it's like these little bite-sized nuggets of intuition and insight and connection with a non-dual space, that's so it's just so healing. Oh my gosh, I have seen just the most beautiful, 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 like healing for my clients over the last several years. And so I was sitting with ketamine a few times during my program, and then after I completed my program for becoming a nurse practitioner, then I completed some other programs in for psychedelic assisted therapies, and then there's experientials that are required for that as well. So I sat with ketamine many times, and then I didn't return to ayahuasca until I traveled to Colombia in 2023, and that coincided literally literally coincided with my first cancer recurrence. I had gone to the psychedelic science um, uh, uh, what are those large gatherings called? My brain will not the
Maps.
yes, the MAPS
Yeah,
conference. Yes, the
yeah.
conference. I had gone to the psychedelic science conference and I got COVID, and then that I'm pretty sure contributed to the arising of that recurrence because I had a clear scan directly before the conference. I came back with the COVID. My cancer markers went up, and I'm not saying this out of like a uh, some sort of like conspiracy type thinking, but because there's actually evidence out there that COVID does that there is some correlation with the possibility of cancer recurrences after a COVID infection, and so I had that first recurrence. Shortly after that, and my cancer markers had just gone up a tiny bit when I went to sit with ayahuasca in Colombia for the first time in a truly meaningful and supported way, which I sat with Joe Tafur, Tzvita Mamich, and this incredible Colombian shaman Sochi. And that was when Buddhism came into my life, was during the second ceremony that we sat with. It literally just descended, and I say descended because I went into a state that was beyond conscious mind. My conscious mind was offline, and when it came back online, what I saw happening was um, I was going like this. I was sitting in like a meditative posture, and my body was going like this, and I there was a hissing that was happening, just and there was like these specific movements my tongue was doing. It was running from the back of my palate to the front, and and it felt so satisfying. When I noticed that I was doing that, I was like, oh, like what is this? Oh, this feels so good. I'm just going to keep doing it. And then and all of these things came into my awareness at once. I also it I saw that there was this, what I now call like this endless unfolding tanka of Buddhist imagery. I knew it was Buddhist imagery, but I didn't know what it was. And I mean, and I can't remember in detail what it was, but it was like, um, they were basically mandalas. They were these beautiful Pure Land mandalas with deities. And it was just absolute paradise. Like it was just complete nirvana, ecstasy, just divinity, just kind of unfolding and washing over me. It was just this waterfall. And it was so interesting because there were no Buddhists at my retreat. And I had not seen, there was no outside influence. I hadn't watched a documentary. There wasn't a poster. I didn't see a book. I didn't hear a podcast. There was nothing, there was no external influence for my mind to then attach to that. It just kind of came seemingly out of nowhere. And there wasn't anybody at the retreat that could help me really integrate, because there weren't any folks there that were practicing Buddhists. And it wasn't for about 6 months that I really kind of came to understand what that is. And then that I was introduced to a Sangha here in Topanga, and that I started to really kind of explore, like, what is Buddhism? How does this fit into my life? And it was in reading about the medicine Buddha and this wonderful woman who was helping me integrate, who came to Buddhism through ayahuasca. She was an ayahuasquera for like 20 years, and then Buddhism started to show up for her in the medicine, and she helped guide me. I'm so grateful for having been connected to her, and then it's just been such a divine unfolding. All right, it's just kind of like the 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 path just continues to unfold, and the doors continue to open, and it really is quite remarkable, because it's like I said, it's felt like, oh, I keep getting these keys. I
Mm.
keep getting these keys, and at this last retreat, it really all like came into alignment. And then I guess just the final thing that I should say is that since 2023, after I came back from the ayahuasca retreat, I found that the cancer was uh, dramatically had dramatically progressed, and it was again throughout my peritoneal cavity, on a bunch of organs. The cancer markers had gone crazy, so it was quite traumatizing, as someone who really has believed in self-healing, to have that experience. And it's been so interesting, because since then I've technically had 3 recurrences, but in my mind it's 4, because I was on a treatment that was very successful up until this January, and there was a malignant, resistant tumor that had been successfully radiated, and then all of a sudden, the cancer outsmarted my my last treatment, and and that was very pivotal for me, because that led me to the question around, does cancer have awareness? Does cancer have consciousness? Because how is it that cancer has a goal, right? How is it that cancer is so focused, so single pointed on a goal for survival, that it can learn how to change its genetic expression? Cancer cells can pump out chemo after a certain point. This is why a lot of people who have malignant cancers die, because you can you can only give them conventional chemo for so long before the chemo kills them. And malignant cancers typically will learn how to present different proteins, pump out the chemo. Like I said, it's extremely intelligent. Where does this intelligence come from? And when you ask oncologists this question, they they say, well, it just learns how to adapt. But if something is learning how to adapt, how is it learning how to adapt? Why is it even adapting? What is there to adapt for, if there isn't an awareness that has a single pointed intention for survival? So that was actually really interesting. And that's kind of where I'm at today, is this really magnificent place of trying to learn from the cancer how
Mm.
we can do the same thing. And then in that kind of led me to, I've been doing yoga for like 25 years, and I've never read the sutras. Right? I've like, who does, right? Like, well, most of us just go to a yoga studio. Like, if you haven't become right? I've never read the sutras. You know what the sutras tell us? The sutras tell us that we actually have to know our anatomy, not just our energy body anatomy, our physical anatomy, and that it's through that kind of focus and intention, focused attention, that we can really affect change. And so this is kind of, this is my question now, is we know about epigenetics, we know about environmental factors that change genetic expression. why should a cancer cell have the skill, intelligence, and ability to change its genetic expression? And uh, people who think of themselves as being these, intelligent, advanced beings, not have that same degree of control over genetic expression. And this makes no sense to me. So this is the question where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, I have a great book recommendation for you that I'm currently reading. It's called The Intelligence of Plants. And this is exactly what the author is talking about. And
Mm.
down to the bacteria and virus level, he basically is saying the same thing that you have come to on your own, which is all these cells are sentient and all these cells are intelligent. And, what is it like? What would it be like to start to relate to the cancer as a sentient being in your body and praying to it, offering gratitude to it, making a blessing to it? And, it's a different kind of relationship than, oh, I just need to kill it and get it out of my body, right?
Yeah.
So I encourage you to really follow that thread that which you came to on your own, and I'll send you the book title after the podcast. It's a really an amazing book. And there's one thing I want to go back to because I feel like it was a huge moment for you was the
Mm.
Buddhist download in the ceremony. How would you describe Buddhism and your relationship to Buddhism?
Yeah. So, and I really want to talk about that. I just want to say one thing about what you just said regarding, relating to the cancer. So, for me, each cancer's had a different kind of archetypal energy. And the first one, I did exactly what you described. I thanked it. Loved it away. I wouldn't let anybody say that I'm in a war with cancer. I was like, no, this is my body. I'm going to, kind of bring it. I didn't think of bringing it into coherence. I thought about bringing it, like delivering it back to the light, thanking it. I wrote it a love letter. I meditated with each of my chemotherapy infusions, like just sending it back to the light, killing it, but sending it back to the light, allowing it to finally rest. And then there were these other ways in which I thought about it. And Buddhism actually kind of the one that I call number three, or that was technically number three. That one I thought of. I very much kind of approached it with wrath, and it was kind of like, no, I'm not loving this thing away. You got the love, get out. This is not your territory, right? And then and there's also like there's some early childhood violation of some kind that I kind of associate this cancer with. So it kind of felt like, okay, this is an entity not that does not belong in this body. But the most recent, this fourth one, where I kind of came to this idea of awareness and consciousness, this is really where this is the most helpful thing to me in any case, in terms of conceptualizing and like bringing the conceptual with the spiritual together, which is that I realize that I can't push it out, just like you said, not wanting to kill it, not pushing it out. I need to bring it into coherence. So there's just this theme of coherence, right? And kind of this idea of the single pointed goal of focus, attention, that I need to help these cells understand that that like we all need to have the goal of maintaining the longevity and life of this body. And so like kind of this divisiveness that cancer creates, it's like either its own longevity, which obviously it's going to kill the co-host one day, right? One way or another it's going to die, but it's going to live longer if it can take over the body versus if it allows the chemo or something else to like end its life, right? So kind of bringing, and this is where I kind of feel like, using the mind, using visualization, and the control that I feel like we should be able to have over all of the cells in our body, just like this, this book that you're describing, is talking about that. Like if we bring it back in, bringing all the parts in, bringing these trauma parts in and accepting them, but guiding them, right? Because they're out of control, right? Cancer cells are out of control, and guiding them back into one, like into the coherent state. But And you know, it's interesting because I don't think I could have come to this kind of concept without Buddhism and without really uh you know, being on a path for understanding and realizing what this thing non-duality is that we, you know, talk about, right? And that, and a lot of us experience in the medicine. Um, and so if I didn't have Buddhism as a framework and a language and a lineage, I think that, yeah, I don't think it'd be possible for me to come into such a state of coherence. And I really what I've noticed in the last few months, especially since this fourth cancer, and I had started on a new treatment, which I actually don't know if it's working yet or not. I will find out tomorrow. Actually, um, is that I have uh, through dedication to a daily yoga practice. I've practiced yoga for a really long time, but never 7 days a week, like maybe 5 days a week, or I don't know, or just kind of like, okay, well, this week I'll, you know, I can only go 3 times, but now I go every single day. And I have all these different texts that I'm reading right now. Some of them are in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So there's like a Neijang yoga practice. There's the sutras. There's, I don't know, I've suddenly been drawn to Yogananda, which I live really close to the self-realization fellowship, and I've never had this connection with Yogananda and his teachings. And there's just this there's a lot of different frameworks that are all connected, that all have the same seed, that relate to clearing the channels and obviously, like, you know, speaking to the chakras and understanding the chakras and meridians or nadis and marma points and all these things and and so there's something that arose during ceremony more recently. So there was the initial um connection to Buddhism in 2023. And I really don't think that I came into like full integration around that until um, when I started sitting again with the medicine in 2025. In October, I sat with Don William, which I actually saw you writing about Don William in your blog. So you know he's a very powerful healer, and I was sitting with him, and that's when I really started to have a lot of hand mudras arising through my body. And as I continued to sit with the medicine, the mudras just kept evolving, and I started using them in my yoga practice, which I believe has cleared or helped to clear some blockages. I don't know if all, but some blockages in my energy body, to a point where I can sit in full lotus for the first time in my life, where I am able to balance even though I can't feel my feet because of the neuropathy, where I am able to just like feel this the power in my core, like so like strongly, so profoundly, that there's just a lot of yoga poses that were really not comfortable or out of my reach. I'm able to bind in almost every position now. Like it's really, and it happened very quickly and all of a sudden. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, but beautiful. I love all of that. One of my questions was going to be, what is your practice like? But you just said so much about that that I feel it's really important to, yeah, just to feel into how you're living it all. But yeah, my question was, what does Buddhism mean to you, or
Does
how
that
do
mean?
you, yeah, because it feels like something very powerful and beautiful, and
Mhm.
just wondering, I see the Tonka in your background there. Yeah, you know, and if you have any daily practice around that it is informed by Buddhism, I would love to know about that.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, you know, so it's interesting. So the path that I've been on, and I want to speak about this very carefully because um there's a lot of tradition and ways of thinking about the path that I think I've had kind of an unconventional um connection to Buddhism. So I came into a sangha where there's a lot of different teachings being offered to students at different levels, right? So it's in the Utak tradition, which uh, Utak is thought to be an emanation of the medicine Buddha, which was really just such a perfect deity for me to connect with. And one thing that I forgot to say that was actually possibly the most interesting part of that ceremony in 2023 is that as I was making the serpentine kind of movement and the hissing, my mind was also saying, I am a deity, I am a deity, I am a deity. And again, I came into awareness as these things were happening. It was not directed by my mind. My mind suddenly noticed, oh, these are the things that are happening. And I didn't even know that the word deity was associated with Buddhism. I thought it was something associated with Hinduism. I didn't, so I really didn't know anything about this. And then when this wonderful guide explained, to me what the connection might be with Buddhism and shared about her lineage with me, um, it it just it was such a it just was such an immediately profound connection to all of the aesthetic expression of that is especially is specifically Tibetan Buddhism. It just felt like, oh my gosh, like I'm home. The songs are so beautiful. They fill me with so much joy. The framework is so freeing, so healing, right? So I'm as far as, Buddhism is concerned, I'm just, I'm a complete newbie, right? I'm a complete newbie. I actually uh just very recently, this came together after our ceremony. I had been collecting these treasures, these very meaningful Buddhist objects, and they didn't have a home. I had a couple little altars, and I recently actually gave up my office. I decided to reduce my hours with where I'm at with this cancer, and I moved into another office that's not. I had my own office, and now I'm just a subletter, and so there's just a lot less pressure. There's less uh, uh, like I don't have to pay as much every month, a lower financial burden. And something about this ceremony that we were at was just so profoundly energizing that all these beautiful things I had, I finally, I brought home the credenza that's there that was in my office, and I brought it home, and it just immediately was like, oh, like this thing belonged here. And now I have an altar and I have a space for healing and sitting. And one of the tanka in the center there, the largest one that you see, that's actually something that I recently acquired. That is a beautiful illustration of the chakras and including the Kundalini snake, kind of at that like lower Dantian region, and they're very powerful. And honestly, like I uh, like after I did Nundro in the Utah tradition, I went directly into an Ati yoga course with a beautiful teacher named Lama Justin, and it's an online course that you do over the course of the year. And I've really been a bad student. I've been a bad student. I and in part it's because I'm in cancer treatment, right? So I have to go get chemo every 3 weeks. This has been my reality for almost continuously for 3 years. And up until this month, I've worked basically full time in private practice, and I make it to yoga every day, and I sit and I read um, these very important texts every morning. I started to suddenly get up at like 5 and 6 a.m. And I sometimes sit and I meditate, but I don't have a regular practice. And and it's been really interesting through the Dzogchen path, kind of learning about these different avenues, right? These different paths, and 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 really accepting that it may not be my path, and I don't have to feel guilty if I don't sit every day, if I don't say mantras every day, if and I have these different tankas in different rooms, and different mandalas, and they will inspire me to sing, and to sit with a particular mantra, and I'm just really give myself grace, and I yeah, and so I think it's important to for me personally, what has been important is being connected to a lineage, understanding the different paths, understanding, um, and I do think that the tantra transformation path is a huge, is is something that is important to me, and that I need in my, in terms of my personal spiritual evolution. But I think there's an aspect of kind of like instantaneous, and kind of an instantaneous awakening that happens too. I feel like I kind of traverse both worlds, and
Wow.
this is where the the connection to mudras, as far as the tantric path is concerned, is has been really profound, and something that evolved through the ayahuasca ceremonies is what I call repairing the field. So the kind of dancing that I was doing during our ceremony, I call that repairing the field. And I started just doing that silently as a meditation. So I do that every day. And I noticed that when I started doing that, like, oh, like it looks like I'm sewing. It look and I've always for many years I've had this idea that if there's trauma, that there are like kinks in the field, like, or like little, I picture these little holes, these kind of aberrations. And so there's definitely there's both, I think, moments of stillness and really like being in a profound state of rigpa that happened for me. um and then there's this kind of transformation that happens through, arises from the body. So it's like doesn't happen through the body, it arises from the body. um that's happening, and yeah, and I think I've
I just want to say you sound like a great student, by the way, and not a bad student.
okay.
And you do have a practice. I mean, you named so many things: reading the sacred text, doing yoga, doing the mudra work. I mean, a practice doesn't have to be something that we particularly get from, you know, a book or a particular lineage. My practice is very syncretic. It's a combination of some shamanistic work, some meditation work, some Indian, right? It's informed by all these different disciplines that I've been close to in my life. And then I knit this, what I call practice together.
Mm,
And so, you girl, you got all kinds of practice. I mean, seriously, it's so interesting how you name so many things that you do daily that are a practice, and yet the mind thinks, well, if I'm not following this particular thing that this Buddhist teacher gave me, then I'm not practicing. But you are practicing. You're
mm,
practicing in your own way, and I think that's beautiful. And it is informed by those different traditions. It's manifesting in a unique way that is you. And
yeah,
that's how, for me, that's how I'm able to commit to the discipline of practice. If I make it my own, I'm like, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it.
yeah, yeah. And I think that is so important. I think that is so important. I think it's important to be grounded in lineage, um, and in tradition, and understanding, but so important to also not be confined within some sort of rigidity that the mind applies to what we call practice. And that's why, I mentioned that there's this platform that I am in the process of creating, where I want it to be an invitation for people to explore movement and to be in touch with the body, but that's not another like practice that is being dictated, right? So it's not, it's not qigong, it's not tai chi, it's not, an asana practice. It's connection with the intuitive movement that needs to arise through that particular body, right? Which holds uh so much history, which holds lifetimes, which has all of these imprints that need to be expressed. That was something that was really interesting and very simple and beautiful that came through in the ceremony that we were in together, where I really got this very clear message that that healing comes through expression, because trauma is impression, right? It's an imprint. And it's like we must express the impression to heal. And so, expression, I think, is really important. And I think that there is something that really I have that ayahuasca has taught me in the most profound way is the wisdom of the body. Like it's the wisdom of the body is really it's I think overlooked in a lot of mental health settings, and there's much more of a focus on somatic therapies, and even IFS, like internal family systems, kind of this parts model, I think, can also be much more embodied type of talk therapy. EMDR, obviously, there's a lot of different therapies now that are really um, bringing the focus back into the body, but I think that this idea of intuition and really, you know, listening to the body and allowing what needs to arise is something that in all of these other kind of more regimented modalities that have their own systems and tools and methods are still missing. I think there's a stepping stone for healing, but I think that the healing really needs to happen at the level of expressing, expressing one's own, um, I don't know what the language is around it. The word need, like needs, right? Like expressing the needs, expressing, um, the, like all of the things that comprise who we are, and something that ayahuasca has really um helped me to to have as an embodied experience is the knowing of past lives, the knowing of that my cells carry in them, that is the wisdom of um the divine, right, that we all possess, and the knowing that any wisdom that arises is just a remembrance. It's nothing new. It's always been here, right? It's just remembrance. It's just bringing us back to the remembrance. So, yeah, I don't know.
I love that. That's a beautiful way to wrap up our talk. If there's a place you want to point anyone that's listening that might want to get in contact with you or see some of the exciting projects that you're working on now, is there
Yeah.
somewhere? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I think that for anyone who's in the LA area, I do practice, and I do both integrative psychiatry, although I prefer to work more with ketamine, but I do I help folks that do need management with medications, especially folks that are wanting to get off of medications, conventional psychiatric medications, and need someone that can kind of hold both spaces. I do that, and the way that I work with people is really more in like a spiritual counseling um, kind of modality that does incorporate some parts work. And my practice is called Transcend Psychiatric, and I have a beautiful office space in Atwater and Atwater Village, and I do ketamine assisted therapy. I do intramuscular ketamine assisted therapy for folks that are interested in that path as well. And so yeah, so if they go to my website, Transcend Psychiatric, they can um, get in touch with me there. And as I develop these other things, I will be offering a class on mudras actually sometime in the next couple of months, as well as I have a couple podcasts, well, two podcasts that I think probably need to be merged into one. But as those things arise and fully develop, then I will be sharing those on Transcend Psychiatric.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for the conversation today and sharing all your beautiful wisdom and your great dance moves in the ceremony. So good. Yeah, just so grateful to get to know you and hear your story. And yeah, just many blessings for healing for your body and your soul as you go forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Derek. It was such a pleasure to speak with you and to get to know you. And thank you for your beautiful, beautiful songs at the ceremony. My goodness, so incredible. Talk about being in like just a state of just profound awareness and connection. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you. Yeah. Okay, Derek, thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay, take care.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing great. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really liked the part where she said trauma likes to move. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years, sitting with a lot of different teachers and a lot of different traditions, is that some invite you to dance during the ceremony. And I really feel like this is an important element of ceremony where people are allowed to move that trauma. They're able to really embody the things that they're feeling as opposed to just sitting there and suffering through whatever they're suffering through. So if you haven't been in a ceremony where you weren't allowed to dance, I would highly encourage you looking for a facilitator, and there are tons out there from many different traditions that allow that movement, and it's really powerful. That's what I have to say. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Please hit that subscribe button and come along on this journey. Leave a review if you feel called. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next episode. Hausch, hausch.